Senator Colomb brings us SB 172 dealing with marriage, and it mandates the minimum age for marriage shall be 16 years of age. Welcome back to the House Committee on Civil Law and Procedure, Senator Colomb. We're nice to see you today.
Thank you very much, Representative Garofalo.
We appreciate you coming to testify on your bill, please.
Absolutely. So it's always good to come home, guys. Actually served over here longer than I'd have in the Senate. So what my bill does is, Louisiana is one of a few states that do not have a minimum age for young people to marry when they're under the age of 18. And it came from a group of students at LSU who I represent, and they asked me to bring the bill. They wanted it to be 18 for lots of reasons, for trafficking, for young people, for men that were much older marrying girls that were 12 and 13 and 14 years old and that kind of thing. And they had some really profound testimony on the Senate side, a letter from a lady that had got married when she was like 14 or 15 for the wrong reasons. So some of my colleagues over there thought that 18 was a little high, so they amended it to the age of 16. And the reason we kind of compromised on 16 was because it is the age when young people can get their driver's licenses. And so, you know, if you can, you can't drive until you're 16, and you don't have enough, maybe the wherewithal, responsibility to drive before 16, you certainly shouldn't be getting married before 16. So that's basically what it does. It says that you have to be a minor under the age of 18. You have to be at least 16 to be able to be married.
Very good. Representative McGee for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think you covered some of the stuff I was curious about. Senator, I appreciate what you're doing. I really do. I might even be the minority in this body, but I really believe it should be 18. It's concerning to me, actually, that I guess my fear is I think we should be at 18 and we're doing something at 16, and it feels like we're putting something in place that's going to hurt the chances of getting it to 18 ultimately. Just because, you know, we have bills right now to raise the smoking age to 21 because we don't trust kids to make a decision on cigarettes. And we're saying we're going to trust them on. I read your bill.
I agree totally with you on that.
And then the protections you're putting in and everything else. I know you're doing the right thing, but to me, it's crazy that we're close to telling children that they have to be 21 to buy cigarettes because we don't trust them to make that decision. But yet we're going to trust them to make probably the most important decision of their entire lives at an age where their brains are not fully formed yet. It's concerning to me. It's concerning to me the law has been this way. I think it's a mistake that we've done this for so long. I think, you know, we need to start looking at the biology of this as well, is that the brains are still fully formed, especially in males. Women, their brains, because they're the superior sex, their brains form
yes,
before.
We are.
They form before the male brain does, and I think we all have the personal anecdote experience to see that young men are not the brightest they're going to be in life until about age 27. And I'm not advocating for an age 27, but I think we need to. But 16 is, we know it's really not formed yet, and I think we don't let them enter into contracts. We don't let them do all kinds of things at this age. And I understand the reasons why, because if, you know, with unwanted pregnancies and that kind of thing that we're trying to establish. But I think if they were forced to wait that decision, we would get a longer lasting marriage than what we're getting now, which is if they're allowed to marry at 16, it's not going to make it to the finish line. So I think it's very short-sighted of us, but it's not any disrespect to you and what your bill is. I know what you're trying to do, and I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely, Representative. I agree totally with you that it ought to be 18. And the reason 18 is, in my opinion, a good age is because it's a good age for everything. Let me give you a little history. 18, right in this chamber, right in this committee, there was a committee, the Civil Law Committee, which this committee is, and Charlie Lancaster was the chairman, and Pepe Bruno was here, and there was a debate going on about raising the age for people to drink alcohol, and everybody wanted to raise it to 21, And I was like you. When I was in the minority, I didn't think it should be 21. Not because I didn't think they needed that much time, but because our United States of America, when we did have a draft, or if we have one ever in the future, they draft at 18. And so my fight was, if you can go and you can learn to shoot hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of weapons or fly planes and that kind of stuff, you ought to be able to buy a beer. Me, myself, and I have never drank in my life. I never smoked. I never did drugs. I was around it a lot, but I chose not to go that route. So and the 18 route for being an adult was, a lot of my colleagues wanted to be finished paying child support at 18. So I told them it needs to be 21 or it needs to be 18. Let's do everything at 18. Let's do everything at 21. And of course, I lost that fight. But 18 was a good age for me. But in order to get it out, I got it out of the committee. But when it came to the floor, our pro tem came up and fought against it. He said, if some young people were 14 or 15 and they, had sex and they got pregnant, they should be able to get married. And so he fought it, and we came to the compromise at 16. So that's why we're at 16.
But what you're doing in that circumstance, you're making one bad decision and complicating, allowing more bad decisions to pile up on top of it. I just think that that's very...
Well, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go on, Senator. I understand his point.
No, I was just going to say that 16, 18 is probably the age, but 16, then anybody younger than 16, we at least kind of help those kids, so they're not 12 and 13 and 14. My grandmother, who raised me, was married when she was 13, but she was born in 1800s, in the late 1800s. That's kind of what they did. Now we know better now, and as a result of that, she had 6 children, but she had 3 miscarriages. She was just too young. Her body was too young to carry a baby, and that happened with our grandmothers and our great grandmothers and stuff like that. But it doesn't happen as much now. In fact, I have a daughter, and she's 36, and she got married last year. She's been married for a year. She's 37 now. And so they're waiting longer to get married.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think that the idea is that we want people to be married. I certainly support that position. But I think the more lightly we make it, the less serious people take it. And by allowing child brides, we're not taking it seriously. And so I think at the end of the day, the more mature and thought out decision you make, the greater chances it's going to last. And we have a high divorce rate. I think having 16-year-olds only increases the divorce rate.
Yeah.
But anyway, I said my piece. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Representative McGee. Representative Johnson for a question.
Hi, I just have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is that, so if I understand this, if we pass this, a 20-year-old can marry a 16-year-old?
They wanted a 4-year age difference, just kind of because I think that was the maximum age that they wanted, age difference.
Okay. And then let me make sure I understand this. You can only, a 16-year-old or 17-year-old can only be married under 1545 if both parents agree.
And that's the way it is now.
And there is no age limit now?
Nope.
It could be 12.
It could be 12.
Okay. But then I note down under the judicial authorization.
Can you tell me where you're reading?
I'm sorry, 1547, page 2, line 21.
Okay.
Is that page 3? It's page 2 on mine.
Page 2, line 21.
Judicial authorization, compelling reasons. Page 3, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what happened to my page 2. I guess
page 3, line 21.
Page 3, line
okay.
21. They're out of order. I'm sorry. Where it says judicial authorization, is that allow the 16-year-old that can't get parental authority to go to a judge, or does it require that in addition to the?
Okay, so minor of the. Yes, come help. I didn't know you were back there. I didn't see you.
Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes.
Does it require both?
Could you please introduce yourself for the record?
Morgan Lamondre with the STAR Center. You should have a card. under current law, in order for a 16-year-old to get married, in addition to parental consent, they have to go before a judge. So what that still allows is, if you're 16, you still would need to go before a judge, but you can't at all have any kind of parental authorization or a judge say it's okay if you're under 16 under the proposed bill.
Okay,
but it doesn't allow, if you're talking about like a judicial bypass, kind of like how they have with,
if you got a kid whose parents won't agree to it,
right, no, that does not,
around it and go to a judge.
correct.
Now,
You
when
still
s-
have to have
And
consent.
when you say judge, do you include justice of the peace?
No, it would have to be like a juvenile court judge, depending on the jurisdiction, if they have juvenile court. But it's somebody who handles juvenile matters.
And do we define, I'm just trying to look, do we define what compelling reasons, the definition of compelling reasons are?
In you're talking,
It says here, a judge may authorize a marriage when there is a compelling reason.
I know that with different case law and things, obviously somebody is going to typically allow a 16-year-old to get married if, say, someone is pregnant. That would probably be considered a compelling reason.
But I mean, do we in code we do not codify
There-
that?
There may be some anecdotal places. I can't tell you for sure where that would be defined, but between that and case law, I'm sure that there's, I don't know if.
Well, so
I'm up, Connie. I mean, Susan.
So as much as I agree with Representative McGee, it appears that this bill, I mean, I didn't realize that you could be married at any age as long as your parent agreed to it.
And the judge.
And the judge, if it's like a 12-year-old, and that does happen.
Jerry Lee Lewis law, huh?
Well, and if
That's
And-
what everybody call it,
what
the
we were
Jerry Lee
calling it.
Lewis law.
And if I-
This one, the one that's existing already, is the one that allows anybody to get married at any age.
And if I could go back to your point about the 4-year age difference, the reason why we put that in, and I had originally recommended a 2-year because there's misdemeanor cardinal knowledge of a juvenile,
Right.
where there's a 2-year age difference. If you can't legally have sex with somebody, then our position was that you shouldn't be able to get married. But there was, in order for the bill to move forward, 4 years is what, since that's the felony cardinal knowledge of a juvenile statute. I agree with Representative McGee, and it looks like right now the House is more progressive than the Senate. I thought there's rumors that it's the other way around,
I'm
but
not sure whether that's a compliment or a criticism. Or who's
you're
Well,
more
you guys
protective.
get-
How's that? You're more
Yeah,
protective.
and you guys got it
concerned
quicker.
about those areas, but I'm concerned that we are leaving a gap that there's no law that, in a sense, in my mind, protects a child. I know of many circumstances and family members, particularly older family members, who got married at age 16 and 17.
Right, but they weren't usually marrying somebody that was like 10 years older than them. And the unfortunate truth is, if you go to the Department of Health's statistics, it shows you the age of the bride versus the age of the groom. And the unfortunate trend is that, and it's not a lot of marriages that are recorded like this, but you do see where some people fall under that 14 to 17 age bracket, and they're marrying 40-year-old something men. And I think we're trying to, if you could be charged with a crime, we're trying to make it to where you can't get married and use marriage as a defense to a crime.
Let's say you have a situation where you have a 20-year-old who
marries a 16-year-old.
no, has a 16-year-old who becomes pregnant. And does this in some way shield that 20-year-old from
That's
criminal?
the 4 years.
I know,
That's
but
the 4
once they
years.
get married, does that alleviate the fact that that's a crime in Louisiana?
So
Yeah, it kind of does.
the way the
Force
cardinal
those kind of
knowledge
marriages into the
statute,
situation?
the way the cardinal knowledge statute is written, which may be a great bill for next year, is it says that the person who is not the spouse of the individual, when the age difference is
4 years.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly. Two.
And it'd have to be like 21 to 16, because if they're
Or a
20 and
day.
16, that
I
would,
mean,
yeah, in a
the
day.
classic shotgun wedding type situation where you have someone who's 19 or 20 and a 16-year-old, and I don't know. It troubles me what our current law is, but I'm not so sure this certainly is a step in that direction, but I am concerned about those 2 or 3 issues, and maybe y'all have something else to. to say about it.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Susan East Nelson.
If you would, Ms.
No
Nelson, we
problem.
appreciate it.
Susan East Nelson with the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. The issue that I think the senator has brought up, and it seems rational and valid, is say you have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old and they get pregnant and the 18-year-old joins the military. Well, if they can't get married, then that child and mother are deprived of medical benefits that they would otherwise have when that person joins the military. So that was one of the exceptions that they wanted to make sure that there was some ability
Compelling
for
reason.
for that child to be covered for an insurance perspective and have that health benefit. So I know that was one of the arguments. I agree with you guys. I think the bright line should be 18, and if you want to get married, you should have to go get emancipated, and then if a judge emancipates you, have fun.
And how many
you know?
16-year-olds do we allow to enter into a contract?
We don't, unless they're married,
Unless
because
they're
then they become
emancipated or
emancipated.
Yeah, because
By
marriage.
property, but we can.
That's correct.
Well, if once they get married, they get the rights of emancipation.
Right, which it was pointed out in the Senate side that any contracts that you enter into for a wedding ceremony, whether it's the caterer or anything, all of those are not going to be valid contracts because you're not married at that point. But
I'm worried about that 16-year-old or that 17-year-old.
we agree with
We
you. I
agree.
think that one of the, as part of moving the bill forward, because right now there's no protection. You can be 12. That's first degree rape. If a 12-year-old has any sort of sexual relationship with somebody older than them, and we need some sort of protection. And if it means that the bill dies, we don't want, there to be no protection. I think that if that's a fight that some of you all want to have, maybe there's some conversations you could have with people in the Senate, but we would want it to get concurred.
But under the current law, it would require parental approval and the judges
Correct.
signing and do we have any statistics on how often that really happens in Louisiana?
I think the most recently posted statistics on LDH's website is in 2010, which I did not see any 12-year-olds on that list, but I think there was a group.
13-year-olds or 14
There
Oh,
were
yeah,
14
there's
and
13 and
15-year-olds.
14,
Absolutely, with
15-year-olds.
large age differences.
Yes.
And I mean, I
And-
think the argument is if there's one 14-year-old getting married to a 35-year-old, we've got to
Right
we
now,
got to make that
would
not
be
happen.
illegal if the parents and the
that it can be perfectly legal. Yeah.
And the other part of it is the trafficking. Some people marry, they're older like that, 35, 40, and then they traffic the girls,
Right.
to make money off of them. And that's a whole nother issue that's out there as well.
And there's lots of statistics too to show that the earlier you have children and just the health problems, and then it makes it harder to get out of an abusive relationship. So we're with you, and I
it's as
support.
though we don't have much of a choice here. We're going to pass a bad law, not a bad law, but maybe a law that could have some improvements because it's such a horrible situation that exists right now.
I mean, and I think as long as something gets passed, if you guys want to amend it, well, this is your bill, but I was going to say amend it on the House floor and then go to conference where you guys can talk to people on the Senate. But I support you, and I think you two should be on that conference committee,
All right.
Well,
Thank you very much.
and let me just say, you guys get it way quicker than my colleagues over there got it. When I went to the floor to debate it, and God bless his soul, Senator Long came up to oppose it, I dropped my jaw. And so
Just start calling it the Jerry Lee Lewis law.
That's actually what we've been
But,
jokingly calling it. It's funny that you said that.
I like Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah, but it was inappropriate.
I let me just say this. I am not opposed to you raising it back to 18 and trying to go to the conference committee and get my people on the conference committee and go from there. I'm not opposed to that.
I'm more concerned about the four-year age. Someone 20 could be married to someone 16. But I'm not. This is certainly better than what we've got.
It is better than what we have.
Thank you.
That you're welcome.
Thank you.
Representative Cruz for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How often do people right now under the age of majority get married and have already been emancipated by a judge? Like there's no parental consent at all. Is that possible? And from what I heard you explain, it is possible, but how often does it happen?
At 17, if you're 17, you just need parental consent without authorization from a judge. I don't have most recent statistics because, like I said, the most recent statistics are not published on LDH's website. I think it just from 2010 is
They do
where
it
we
by
have.
census.
Yeah, and it's not that great of a majority of total marriages, but it's enough to where I think if you're looking at 17-year-olds marrying other 17-year-olds, there's a good, like maybe 100, I think was around. But when you're looking at the age difference where it's maybe a 15-year-old marrying a 40-something-year-old, the statistics go, it's less, but it still causes people concern, because it's also, these are just the records that of people getting marriage licenses in Louisiana. It's not maybe somebody from another state, but the truth is that other states right now, there's movement where other states, other southern states are pushing for 18 as well. So we're kind of an outlier in that in order to get it pushed forward, we are trying to set the floor at 16, which is still better than no floor.
Well, and to answer your question, because the marriage essentially emancipates them, most of them will not go through the judicial emancipation process, because the law says once you get married, then you have the rights of a major.
Okay, and once you're emancipated, is that for life?
Yeah.
So even
Well,
if that marriage is
18.
terminated, divorce,
Yes.
whatever.
Correct. It
Yes.
actually spells that out
It
in
actually
the
spells that out in the
children's
code.
code that no matter what, even if
You're
Whatever age,
emancipated for life.
Yeah. So many of them will just get married at 17, and they could very well get divorced before they're 18, and they're still considered majors under the law.
I see. Thank you.
Representative Johnson, you have another question?
What are the other states in our southern region have in the way of laws?
and most people wouldn't
No
consider
Alabama
Tennessee.
jokes. No, just asking you jokes.
I know Tennessee was the state that just passed a law to 18. I'm pretty sure. I can find the information,
I
maybe
just
get
wondered
it
if
to
you
you.
knew.
I
There's-
just remember Tennessee being
It's
recent.
not a big movement in the South. Let me put it that way, because there's a lot of people who have a problem with the bright line below 18 within the South, and it's a lot of people who really
she got it
value
from
children.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
I mean, what's 16? A freshman in high school?
Probably
Sophomore,
junior,
junior.
Sophomore?
junior, a sophomore. If you're born funny, like after.
I probably
Born
would have been
funny.
a freshman.
It says on her list, which, I'm sure she could provide you the citation. This is me just reading. It says Virginia, as far as southern states, Virginia, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky, which, depending on, we don't necessarily consider those states southern. Maybe Texas and
Mississippi,
Georgia,
Arkansas.
but
What do they have as a way of a law?
Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas. I think they have a floor, but it might be like 16.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Okay, as I said, Morgan Lamadre from the Sexual Trauma and Awareness Response Organization is at the table. Susan East Nelson from the Louisiana Department of Children and Families at the table, both present, wishing to speak. Also, Melissa Bosley from the Tigers Against Trafficking, wishing to speak. Do you still want to testify, Melissa? Yes. Okay, come on up. Also present, will provide information if requested, Susan Thibodeau, Tigers Against Trafficking, Michelle Sorensen, Tigers Against Trafficking, and Claire Stagg, no affiliation, all here if requested to speak. We have someone else coming up with Melissa. Marissa.
Yes, Marissa.
Marissa, I apologize for that. And who do we have with Marissa?
Hi, I'm Michelle Sorensen.
Okay, Michelle.
I'm an officer with Tigers Against Trafficking.
Excellent. Who would like to go first? Marissa?
Thank you. My name is Marissa Bosley. I was the president of Tigers Against Trafficking at LSU during the 2018-19 year. I was the one who restarted the movement to enforce marriage in Louisiana through Tigers Against Trafficking with the help of Claire Stagg, Sarah Thibodeau, Michelle Sorensen, Haley Teachout, and other passionate students. I appreciate the work that has been done here and you letting me speak here today. I'm going to kind of touch on a couple of things that y'all kind of already mentioned. Child marriage is a form of forced marriage and puts minors at risk for poor health, poor emotional and cognitive growth, and a lack of a good future in their own right. According to the United Nations Children Fund, international laws, treaties, and conventions, forced marriage is defined as marriage at any age that occurs without the free and full consent of both spouses. Therefore, it includes child and early marriage, as children under 18 are not able to give full consent. Given the current law of Louisiana, a minor cannot marry without parent's signature or for anyone under 16 years of age without court approval. It follows a child marriage is not only lacking in consent, but it also not within the minor's jurisdiction who is to be married. It's not in their free and full consent, so under international law, this is a human rights issue. The United Nations Children Fund states girls who marry before 18 are more likely to experience domestic violence and less likely to remain in school. They have worse economic and health outcomes than their unmarried peers, which are eventually passed down to their own children, further straining a country's capacity to provide quality health and education services. Thus, this becomes an economic and domestic issue for our state as well. Human trafficking, according to the United States Department of Justice, is a crime that involves exploiting a person for labor, services, or commercial sex. We have seen cases where children have been sold to be married to older men. Since this is a crime, we have limited data on this. However, according to a study by Frontline on child marriages in the United States, 86% of child marriages between 2010 and 2015 were minors married to older adults. Thus, this is also a human trafficking issue. Today, we propose one of many possible solutions for these issues. We have seen several other states pass these similar bills to this since 2016. This is from Unchained at Last, including Virginia, Connecticut, Texas, Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky. I would like to state that this was not our original bill. From the conclusions made by the research and definitions I've provided, we would prefer a ban on all marriages for those under 18 years of age to ensure full jurisdiction to all parties attempting to get married. However, we also support anything better than the current alternative. New amendments that were reached allow 16 and 17 years of age minors to be married with restrictions. With the compromise and support of Senator Colomb and Senator Luno, we find ourselves here asking that you remove the ability for predators to take hold of children under 16 with legally bound marriage contracts held up in the court of law. We ask that you help improve upon these human rights issues, economic and domestic issues, human trafficking issues, and the many possible other issues that I've not been able to share in this testimony by passing this bill through committee.
Hello, my name is Michelle Sorensen.
Sorry, Michelle. I was in a conversation. I apologize.
Gotcha.
Michelle Sorensen from Tigers Against Trafficking. Please go ahead.
So I would just like to present some marriage statistics. The investigative journalism Frontline did some research into the statistics of child marriage within the United States. So I'd like to present some numbers for you. Between 2000 and 2015, at least 207,459 minors were married in the United States. That would be 4,532 in the state of Louisiana between 2000 and 2015. That would be 27 out of 10,000 marriages are children. So we were talking a little bit about what sorts of ages that people traditionally get married at. Well, the numbers of children who are married before 16 years of age would be 5% of all the total marriages of child brides. And typically the ages of the typically it's younger girls who are getting married to older men. So the statistics for the husband or for the older partner would be 15% of them would be over the age of 25, and that's within the state of Louisiana, or those are statistical averages across 41 states. So it's possible that hundreds, if not thousands, of children in the United States total would be getting married when they're 14 or 15 years old. And within the state of Louisiana, there would be several cases of just such a thing occurring. So it is, as they've been talking about, right now, with the floor at age 16, there's no protections for 15-year-olds or 14-year-olds, and this bill establishes protections for those instances of marriage. Thank you.
So I don't think that I've heard, and you guys seem like you've done the most research. Where are our neighbors? Do you have that? Not as far as how many marriages there are, but what are they requiring? What age? What's their threshold for being able to get married?
So I believe that Delaware and New Jersey have total floors of 18 years old, a complete ban on marriages under the age of it. Overall, the age is usually 16 with exceptions for younger children. For the most part, it's been mostly age 16 as the average barrier to ages, and it's mostly exceptions, like in the state of Louisiana, that allow marriage even younger.
How about the gap with the 4 years for the spouse, male or female?
Can you be more specific in your question?
Sure. Right now, the way the bill's structured, if the younger person getting married is below 17, then if the older person is at least 4 years older, then that's okay. That's the way I'm reading the bill, correct?
Correct.
And do you know what other states do with that spread, that 4-year spread?
I know that one state has a 3-year gap, but I'm not sure which. I don't recall which one it is.
Okay. All right, Representative Cruz, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I'm not really a fan of the state being the nanny. I think parents ought to be parents. But what really disturbs me about this is, where are the parents in this, and how is this happening? How does a parent let a 35-year-old man marry a 14-year-old or whatever? I mean, can y'all fill in some stories of how this is happening? What precipitates this type of behavior?
The parents have to consent.
Exactly, but why are they consenting is what I'm trying to
We
understand.
haven't figured that one out. I mean, Susan may know more on it, but some parents, believe it or not, and I know that this part is true, they've let their younger children go for economic reasons.
Yeah, so last year there was a woman who testified, and it was in a very rural area, that the father basically traded his daughter for a freezer full of deer meat.
So
Yeah.
it's happening.
So
too.
yes, the parents are there, and they get some sort of economic benefit, and here, take her, she eats too much.
Well, it's disturbing to me because I feel in Louisiana particularly, most of our ills are caused from poor families. And I mean dysfunctional families. Families that don't understand what that means, ones that are torn apart, whatever. So this is...
And I think in a lot of situations we're perpetuating a cycle. So, mom got married at 15. So what's wrong with it? I'm here, and then they don't see that there's much more economic value if the daughter finishes her education and is able to be prosperous
They
before
just
she
perpetuate bad choices.
Yes, sir. But to answer your question, Mississippi, our nearest neighbor, they have kind of an interesting law. It's the minimum age is 15 for females, 17 for males. So they make a distinction between the genders, and they have to have parental consent and a court order. But that's the bright line minimum age. So, so if you're a 16-year-old boy in Mississippi, you have to wait.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cruz. All right, we have no more questions. All right, Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to offer an amendment this time to change the 4-year cap to a 2-year cap. I think that I can't see a good reason why a 20-year-old should marry a 16-year-old. If they love each other that much, they'll get married at a later date. I'm not against people. My parents are 8 years apart. It's not the age difference, but they got married at 30.
When they were adults.
Yeah, when they were adults. But allowing a 20-year-old to marry a 16-year-old is unacceptable under any provision. And so I feel much more comfortable with your bill at 18 and 16. I think that's two children getting together and making a decision, and not an adult who has an advantage of age and power over that 16-year-old. So in that spirit, I'd like to offer my amendment.
Okay, Representative McGee.
And I do not object to the amendment.
I'm going to add in Ms. Smith here.
All right.
Ms. Smith, can you describe the amendment?
The amendment will be on page 1 at the end of line 13. Change 4 years or greater to greater than 2 years. And then the same change would be made on page 3, line 4. Change 4 years or greater to greater than 2 years.
Representative Cruz.
This first set for the technical?
That's a technical set. We can get to that. It doesn't make a difference the order, does it? Okay. And we will get to that. Representative McGee, is that the substance of your amendment?
Yes.
I think it's even better.
Okay, members, Representative McGee has offered an amendment that has just been described. Any objections to the adoption of that amendment? Seeing none, that amendment will be adopted. We also have a technical set of amendments. Thank you, Representative Cruz, for reminding me. It's in your folders. It's Amendment Set 3284. Ms. Smith, you want to describe this real quick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Amendment set 3284 creates uniform use of the terms 16 years of age and 16 or 17 years of age throughout the bill, and then it makes other technical changes.
Any objections to the adoption of the technical amendment? Seeing none, that amendment will be adopted. Back on the bill. Members, what's the will of the committee? Any closing first before we... I tend not to close, but...
I think you guys have given me a fair hearing. I think you understand the issue, and so I'll just ask for favorable approval with as amended.
Okay, Representative Cruz is going to go ahead and move that we report SB 172 favorably as amended. Any objections? Seeing none, SB 172 will be reported favorably as amended. Thank you so much for your testimony today, ladies.
And members, and thanks for your input, and thanks for caring enough to listen and hear and understand. And I'll take any volunteer that want to handle it on the floor for me. Mr. McGee? I'll think about it. Okay, let me know. I appreciate it. Thank y'all so much.
This is the furthest this
It's
bill has
ever
ever
been.
gotten. So
Yeah.
this is incredible.
Thank y'all so very much.
Very good. Thank you guys for coming to testify today.